Imagine a world at war, where hope hangs by a thread and the enemy appears invincible. In the early months of 1942, the United States faced such a reality. The attack on Pearl Harbor had plunged the nation into World War II, and Japan's military advances seemed unstoppable. Yet, in the midst of despair, a bold and improbable plan emerged. A plan to strike at the heart of the Japanese Empire and reignite American resolve. This is the story of the Doolittle Raid, an audacious mission that changed the course of history. Led by a fearless pilot, James Doolittle, and carried out by a team of brave airmen, the raid pushed the boundaries of military strategy and human endurance. It was a mission that demonstrated the power of innovation and the courage of the few. Join us as we delve into the extraordinary events of this daring operation. Chapter 1: The Dark Days After Pearl Harbor. In the aftermath of Pearl Harbor, America was shaken to its core. The Japanese Empire appeared unstoppable. Military bases, key territories, and Allied strongholds across the Pacific were falling like dominoes. The morale of the American public and military was at an all-time low. But in this dark hour, an audacious plan began to take shape, a daring response that would take the war to Japan's doorstep. This is the story of the Doolittle Raid, a mission born out of desperation but carried out with unparalleled courage. What inspired this seemingly impossible mission? And who was the man bold enough to lead it? Stay tuned as we uncover the genesis of this daring operation. Chapter 2: The Vision of James Doolittle. James Doolittle was no ordinary pilot. A test pilot, aeronautical engineer, and master tactician, Doolittle had earned a reputation for his boldness and ingenuity. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, he was tasked with designing a response that would show Japan its vulnerability and boost American morale. His plan? Launch bombers from an aircraft carrier, something never before attempted. It was a high-risk, high-reward strategy. Doolittle himself described it as a mission that would either end in success or catastrophe, with little room in between. How do you prepare bombers for a mission they were never designed for? The answer lay in innovation and grit. Let's dive into the incredible preparations. Chapter 3: Preparing for the Impossible. The B-25 Mitchell bomber was selected for its range, payload, and adaptability, but it needed extensive modifications to suit the unique demand of the mission. Engineers removed excess equipment, installed extra fuel tanks, and even replaced bomb sights with simpler, custom-made versions to save weight. Meanwhile, pilots underwent grueling training. They practiced taking off from mock carrier decks painted on airstrips, perfecting low-altitude flying to evade radar detection, and mastering navigation over open ocean. Every detail had to be flawless, as the success of the raid hinged on their preparation. The secrecy of the operation was paramount, with crews sworn to silence. The bombers were ready, but could they launch undetected and reach their targets in Japan? The mission begins, and the tension is about to skyrocket. Chapter 4: Launching into History. On April 18, 1942, the USS Hornet set out with its precious cargo, 16 modified B-25 bombers. The plan was to launch from 400 miles off the Japanese coast, but when the task force was spotted by a Japanese patrol boat, the mission's timetable was forced to accelerate. Despite being 650 miles from Japan and facing uncertain fuel reserves, Doolittle and his men pressed on. The deck of the Hornet buzzed with tension as the bombers prepared for takeoff. In a feat of incredible skill and determination, all 16 aircraft successfully launched into the overcast skies, heading toward their targets. The raid succeeded in reaching Japan, but what awaited the bombers in enemy territory? And how would they make it back? Chapter 5: Bombing Tokyo. The bombers reached their targets in Tokyo and other cities, including Yokohama, Nagoya, and Kobe. They struck military and industrial sites, oil refineries, and warehouses. Although the physical damage was limited, the psychological impact was seismic. For the first time, Japan's home islands had been attacked. The raid shattered the illusion of invincibility among Japanese leaders and citizens alike, and it sent a clear message: America was not defeated. The bombers strafed targets and then turned toward China, where they hoped to land safely. But the journey was far from over. Out of fuel and deep in enemy territory, the raiders faced unimaginable peril. Chapter 6: The Perilous Escape. Running on fumes, the raiders encountered severe challenges. Weather conditions deteriorated, and many aircraft were forced to crash land or ditch at sea. Chinese civilians risked their lives to shelter the American airmen, helping most of them evade capture. Tragically, the Japanese retaliated with brutal campaigns in the regions where the raiders had landed, resulting in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Chinese civilians. 8 airmen were captured by the Japanese, 3 of whom were executed, while others endured years of captivity under horrific conditions. Despite these sacrifices, the bravery of the raiders and their Chinese allies became a powerful symbol of resistance. How did the Doolittle Raid change the course of the war? And what became of its heroic leader? The answers will surprise you. Chapter 7: Legacy of the Raid. Though the material damage was limited, the Doolittle Raid had far-reaching consequences. It forced Japan to redirect resources to homeland defense, weakening their offensive capabilities elsewhere. This shift played a pivotal role in the American victory at the Battle of Midway just weeks later. For the American public, the raid was a much-needed morale boost. As for Doolittle, he initially feared court-martial for the loss of all 16 aircraft, but instead, he was awarded the Medal of Honor and promoted to Brigadier General. His leadership and the bravery of his men cemented their place in history. Chapter 8: Remembering the Raiders. The Doolittle Raiders are remembered as pioneers of bravery and ingenuity. Annual reunions celebrated their bond, and their story lives on in museums, films, and books. Their courage inspired future generations of aviators and leaders. In the decades following the war, the Raiders received numerous honors, including a Congressional Gold Medal. Memorials in China and the U.S. stand as enduring tributes to their heroism and sacrifice. Today, their legacy reminds us of the power of courage in the face of overwhelming odds. If you enjoyed this journey into history, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of extraordinary courage.